Welcome back to Living in the Bay Area. My name's Katie Pratt. I'm a Bay Area realtor. Today, I'm going to tell you about everything new and coming soon you might not know about in San Francisco in 2026. If you live here or are planning to move here, some of these changes are going to impact your possibly neighborhood choice because of the increase in housing stock, commute patterns, or your way of commuting, and your cost of living. Now, you might already have been noticing headlines around the impacts of the new gold rush of AI companies and founders wanting to be in an environment that fosters collaboration and connection to other entrepreneurs seeking the same thing. And that there's been a resurgence of activities, third places, just nightlife and life in San Francisco in general in the last year. And some of those changes we've credited to the new mayor and to some of the task force that have been initiated in certain neighborhoods in San Francisco. In part one of this video, I'm going to talk about new developments and infrastructure changes in San Francisco in 2026, some of which have already been in development, but phases of those changes. In part two, I'm going to talk about new construction options. Some are built to lease, but some are built to own, and not all of them are located in San Francisco proper. And in part three, I'm going to talk about the 2026 San Francisco downtown calendar and some other events that are coming back this year you might want to put on your calendar and look ahead. Number one, new infrastructure change that hopefully will make commuting easier for South Bay, Peninsula, and ultimately Central Valley commuters easier when it comes to getting downtown, and that's going to be the portal. The portal is also known as the downtown rail extension, with the ultimate hope of connecting the high-speed rail from other parts of Central Valley and the Bay Area to the downtown Salesforce Transit Center. There was already a train box that was constructed underneath the transit center at Salesforce, and the plan is to extend Caltrain from 4th and King to the Salesforce Transit Center. Right now, the transit center feels more like a bus hub, and when we think about the practicalities of hopping on Uni or BART versus waiting on a specific bus, it's less cumbersome, or it feels that way to some commuters, to be able to just take one line of transit instead of a combination of the things that I've named before. So if you can stay on the train longer without disrupting your workflow on your way to work, if you work while you commute, time is money in San Francisco. Another big project San Franciscans in this area might be excited for is the 530 Sampson project, which is a development project of 530 Sampson and 447 Battery Street, where San Francisco Fire Station 13 currently is located, into a 41-story mixed-use development project. About 20% of the space is a new hotel. A larger portion of that space is going to be Class A office space. There is some criticism about why not more housing, especially in this location, and also because there is a lot of post-pandemic empty office space. And the bottom 4 levels above a basement space will be dedicated, of course, to Fire Station 13. And of course, residences for the firefighters will be built out in this new development. And there'll be parking for about 74 cars and 104 bicycles. The hope is that there will be more downtown activity with these retail centers where it's stimulating tourism. There are also arguments about individual owners having so many restrictions on their Airbnb units. Meanwhile, we have no problem approving bigger entities to own these types of hospitality options. Let's move from downtown to some more waterfront projects. One of San Francisco's next biggest infrastructure plans is the Waterfront Resilience Program, which is planned in conjunction with the Army Corps of Engineers to create an earthquake resilient, tsunami resilient, or I should rather say water level rising resilient shorefront extending from Fisherman's Wharf all the way down to Bayview. While there aren't many details in the draft plan, or this resiliency is being addressed with natural solutions such as wetlands, probably reconstruction of the shoreline. Not really sure if they're increasing or creating barriers or increased heights on some of the shoreline projects they're currently working on. Anyway, more details to follow. Federal government is funding 65% of this $13.5 billion project. And again, it's from Aquatic Park all the way to Heron's Head Park. And all the water that won't touch San Francisco in these areas will just flood Alameda and Oakland, Berkeley. I'm just kidding, but please check out the NOAA's sea level water rising maps and its projections for the next 30 to 50 years. Buyers are underwriting risk differently now, especially if you're living on the coast. In some of these neighborhoods we've highlighted already, a lot of the goals of some of San Francisco's improvement projects for parks are shoreline parks. So the Seawall program is happening in conjunction with equitable access to beautiful parks and their amenities. And on that note, because I feel like we never give the western neighborhoods any love, especially Ocean Beach and the neighborhoods outer Sunset and outer Richmond areas, one of the biggest pedestrianization along what used to be the Great Highway
days, is now called Sunset Dunes Park. It was the largest pedestrianization project in California. 2 miles from Sloat Boulevard to Lincoln Way and 50 acres of park. Opened on April 12th of 2025, but wanted to mention that since we were mentioning other water access improvement projects. Now let's also switch over to another neglected area of San Francisco, I would say historically, and that's the India Basin Shoreline Park. Started construction in the 1990s, and this is a physical upgrade for those neighborhoods for water access and the recreation and amenities that those parks will now provide. We're in phase 3, which means they're making some improvements to the slopes along the shoreline. They're adding a gravel beach. There's several other improvements, but there's a new cookout terrace, and they're replacing all of the existing decks in that part of the shoreline. One more shoreline improvement project I'll mention is Mission Rock. It's more like a neighborhood improvement project, and that's Pier 48 along 3rd Street. I've neglected to mention that there are a ton of restaurants, bars, live music. So Mission Rock is a multi-phase waterfront neighborhood development project. So this includes the development of new retail spaces, changes in infrastructure, since this is brand new construction, and addition of housing units, which unfortunately are built to lease and not built to own. However, at least 40% of those are supposed to be affordable or low income. One of those new buildings, the Canyon on 3rd Street, had a lottery system. It's whatever was available has already been filled. The practical impact of all of this, there's more neighborhood activity or the feeling of being in a neighborhood, or there being life in this neighborhood that's not centered on the games at the Chase Center or the ballpark games. This is part of the Sea Level Resilience Program. There are going to be over 1,200 new housing units included in this neighborhood project, and there'll be 8 acres of new parks and open spaces. All right, let's go into the center of San Francisco, or one of the neighborhoods we can say is the heart of San Francisco and what people think of when they think of San Francisco, and that's the Castro. What's a big deal? What's already happened is that the Castro Theater has reopened. I think I have video footage from 2021 snooping around. It felt that way in 2021 when everything was shut down, but the Castro Theater was only open to, or it had been, the host of larger events, conferences, sometimes speakers, film screenings, having directors come and speak about the film. Outside some of the local venues in the Castro that have occasional guest speakers, like the Academy, which is a club along Market Street, and probably the LGBTQ Historical Society. There aren't a lot of other things to do outside of the nightlife and bar scene and restaurants that we see in the Castro. So this is an exciting reopening. Some more news related to you as an individual homeowner and dealing with the San Francisco Building and Planning Commission. If you want to make renovations, SF Permits is supposed to have a more streamlined process starting February 13th, 2026, where you can apply for typical like-for-like permits or in-kind permits online. This process is supposed to be more streamlined. Please remember, some permit examples include door, window replacement, siding replacement. Of course, I would love to do more due diligence on this particular topic. And please comment below if you've already gone through this process using their new online permitting system. This has always been accepted as part of the San Francisco doing improvements with permits friction cost. And on the subject of changing costs, a cost of living in San Francisco in 2026, one increase in cost you can expect in regard to utilities in 2027, 2028 is an increase in your monthly sewage and water bills. If they become approved, SFPUC will publish those increased rates in 2027. Those increases, however, will become effective July 1st, 2026 if approved. On the subject of utilities, San Francisco lawmakers are announcing a way to end their 120-year obligation to use PG&E as our electric and gas provider. Is this going to be a good thing? I don't know. I feel like everyone, do you remember Aaron Brockovich? That's the company that was highlighted in that movie. The consumers are always paying for their rate hikes. In the last 5 years, I believe rates have increased 70%. You could fact check me on that. PG&E is the largest investor-owned utility company in California. San Francisco is trying to purchase the assets that PG&E uses and create its own gas and electric company. SB 875 is the bill that will allow San Francisco to execute on this. Hopefully, it will lead to lower utility rates for gas and electric and better service for San Franciscans. Let's move on to part 2, new construction. Part 2, new construction in the news, not just limited to San Francisco proper. Now let's talk about new housing. I'm a proponent of build to own. There is a lot of build to lease that hopefully will have a downward pressure on median rents in all of San Francisco. But the first project I'm going to talk about is the Yerba Buena Island and Treasure Island new development project. Since 2007, the government and environmental organizations have been remediating the toxic waste that was left over on what was a naval station and still is used as a naval base on Treasure Island. And it's been one of the easier places in San Francisco to approve high density housing projects. Therefore, we have about 70,000 10,000 units that have been approved to build on Treasure Island, with a goal of adding 10,000 units per year. Where we are now is 10,800 homes have been planned to be built. They're further along in this process. And more units, the intention of building these particular units were to sell them rather than to lease them, which is great. Build to lease, I believe, is more economical for the developers. It's faster to get a unit hypothetically rented for a living rather than sell a unit. They're already developing many parks. We've changed the public transportation there, which I'll get into in a second, is one of the other improvements to mention. And Treasure Island has the highest percentage of people aged 18 to 44 in San Francisco. Something I wanted to mention earlier when it came to public transportation, increasing transportation options to downtown San Francisco. The once privately owned ferry service from Treasure Island is now being purchased by SF Bay Ferry. Right now, ferries are offered every hour from Treasure Island to San Francisco. They plan to increase the frequency of service and also electrify the ferries by 2027. So expect to have a ferry every 10 minutes. Maybe there will be multiple ports at which you can take the ferry, so you don't have to be on the west end of Treasure Island. And maybe this is an option for a lot of young folks who want the most incredible views of both San Francisco and the East Bay, and to have quick access to the Bay Bridge or the ferry service to access either side of the bay. And I've already mentioned a little bit about Mission Rock and the shoreline protection program, but in Mission Rock, again, there's more build to rent than there is build to own, and that can always make a neighborhood feel more transitional rather than long-term. Another note to add here is that when building residential, it might pencil better for developers to have more one-bedrooms and studio apartments than it does for them to create 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom housing. And for that reason, an area can seem more transitional and less like a long-term neighborhood or a place where people stay. The next development I want to talk about is Candlestick Park and Hunters Point Shipyard Phase 2, which also involves, like Treasure Island, environmental remediation, cleanup, and the replacement of 283 existing affordable housing units with new housing units. Some of these other waterfront projects that I was describing also hope to make that area feel more connected and accessible to water transportation and other types of commuting that haven't been as available to those neighborhoods. So they want to, in this development project, increase access and improve open space parks, public transportation, have more rapid transit bus lines access this part of San Francisco, and create, hopefully, marina-based public transportation. These community amenity spaces will also be surrounded by over 10,000 new housing units, and 31% of those are meant to be low to moderate income housing units. Whether or not these are all built to lease or built to own, I have to do more due diligence. Hopefully, they're creating more housing stock for long-term ownership. My experience being that far out in San Francisco, and the weather, the views, beautiful. But if you are considering being that far away from central San Francisco, you might want to consider what's happening across the bay in Oakland. And that brings me to my next development project, is Brooklyn Basin, which has been happening over the past 5 years. This is a 64-acre waterfront site with 3,100 units. I know less about some of the protective measures for sea levels rising on this project than I do for the other San Francisco projects. However, it has served as an alternative to Jacqueline Square. And pro is that you are further from downtown if you want a little bit more peace and quiet. The downside is that you don't have the same commute options such as the ferry or BART or the train system, Amtrak, if you are commuting to other parts of the Bay Area or commuting to San Francisco. So you'd have to commute to Jacqueline Square for those options. And as you might predict, as I've talked about in other videos, there is not a ton of new housing construction that's build to own done at scale in Oakland and Berkeley. What we do see a lot of is new construction by UC Berkeley to meet the housing demands for their required number of admissions for local students and international students. So another Bancroft-Fulton student housing development happening in 2026 for UC Berkeley. And what I would expect to happen is perhaps this will have downward pressure on rents for people who are not students and students who choose to live in older housing stock away from campus. And it might even encourage longer-term tired landlords to put their housing on the market and increase some housing options or housing inventory near campus. Part 3, what can we expect for major events in San Francisco in 2026 from March and beyond? San Francisco has become the epicenter for AI startups. The AI Engineer World's Fair 2026 is going to be June 30th to July 2nd at the Moscone Center, right after San Francisco Pride, which is always a tourist event. On the subject of tech conferences, there's Dreamforce 2026, which is going to be September 15th through 17th, again downtown at the Moscone Center. Dreamforce is an especially significant event because it brings in 40,000 to 50,000 new people in San Francisco. So because of San Francisco's Airbnb restrictions, if you are an owner who lives in their unit, you can share your unit without restriction. But if you have a separate unit unit in your building or you don't own or occupy, you're limited to 90 short-term rental days per year. This might be some of that calendar that you block out for short-term rentals. Again, on the San Francisco Pride, this is not downtown centric. Well, it is for tourists if you go to the Pride Parade. But if you're participating in the other San Francisco Pride events at the end of June every year, Dolores Park is a hot spot for all the activity, as is the Castro neighborhood, Mission Dolores, the Beauce Triangle, and some of the long-term third places for celebration of those events like the Stud, Wild Southwest, Jolene's, Q-Bar. Good luck getting around the Castro during San Francisco Pride. If you're a local who wants to participate in Pride activities, perhaps go up to Guerneville. Scratch the numbers I was surprised by with Dreamforce. Every year in San Francisco, because of BART ridership data, vendor records, and other crowd analysis companies or agencies, San Francisco attracts over 1 million people annually for the Pride event. 1 million. San Francisco's population more than doubles during Pride. So again, what I said about the Airbnb. All right, another event coming to San Francisco in 2026 is the Pokemon World Championships, and that's going to be August 28th to the 30th, again, downtown at the Moscone Center. Lastly, I want to talk about sports, Oracle Park, and the early season downtown waterfront spike, population spike, activity spike because of the sports events. The MLB opening night in 2026 is going to be in Oracle Park. That'll be the Giants hosting the Yankees on March 25th, 2026. And even more consistent energy will be brought back to Mission Bay and China Basin because the Valkyries games start. The first home game will be, I believe, April 25th, 2026. That was an unexpected, I'll say the games are more fun than the Warriors games. And the season will last April 25th until mid-September. Tickets are selling out fast for specific games, so go ahead and get your tickets now. San Francisco has done a great job supporting and retaining its sports teams. Didn't seem these new development neighborhoods that didn't seem as vibrant during the pandemic are now seems to be a resurgence of activities. I'm excited to see what comes next. So again, I'm Katie Pratt. I help analytical buyers and sellers make smart numbers first decisions across the Bay with a strong focus on the East Bay and micro markets and then other parts of San Francisco. If you're planning a move to the San Francisco Bay Area in 2026 and you don't know the difference between San Francisco and some of its surrounding alternatives, I'd be happy to be your guide. As you might have figured out, the Bay Area is not one market. So if you're interested in learning more or want a consultation, click on the link below in the description. We'll be happy to act as your real estate guide.